Good evening. I want to start out with our logistics for our town hall, and so therefore we have to post our meeting because 4 or more trustees have gathered together, and so we do have a quorum. So I just want to state that we have a quorum present, but this is our town hall for two-way communication with you. Also, I have to open the floor to any public comments. So if anyone has any public comments that they want to say at this time, I will yield the floor.
Obviously, I am with the DeSoto ISD PTA. So what I'm going to say is about the PTA, but it's also about parent engagement. The reason I do what I do is what this room looks like. This room should be full to capacity for this town hall tonight. And I'm a believer that the big reason it's not is because PTA is needing to be redeveloped here in DeSoto ISD. So I encourage everybody in the audience to join your campus's PTA this year when school starts. Actually, you can join after Sunday, August 1st.
Get involved. Those of you who are watching at home, please get involved with our PTA. And so moving into our next agenda item, it is now opening up our town hall. So I want to say good evening to everyone. Good evening, good afternoon. Thank you for being here. It is a Thursday, but we wanted to make sure that this information came to you in person and online for those of you who are watching, but we wanted to make sure that we were accessible to you. So with that, my name is President DeAndrea Fleming of the DeSoto ISD Board of Trustees. I want to acknowledge our superintendent, Dr. DeAndre Weaver. He's with us today. And this moment is where you get to hear the progress of the board. What does that mean for governance? What does that mean for where we are with the conservator? What does that mean for the future? And how does what we're doing as board members for governance translate into improving student outcomes? So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Trustee Banks.
We will present to you all the LSD overview, the board restraints and revisions, the status of each one of our goals, and the progress of the board. And at the end, we will have it open for y'all to have questions, and we will give you the answers. Okay, let me introduce to you all our board of trustees. For those of you that have not met us or have seen us around, to my right is Ms. Kathy Go, Trustee Kathy Go. Myself, Cynthia Watson Banks, and Ms. Tracy McNary. Karen Daniels. And to my left is Mr. A. Cooper, Ms. DeAndrea Fleming, and Dr. Tiffany Clark. As I stated earlier, we're going to do our Lone Star governance overview. And with that being said, we must always keep in mind as a board and as our community is that student outcomes don't change until adult behaviors change. Now I'm going to present to you Ms. Karen Daniels. She will come up and give us our Lone Star governance overview.
Good evening. I'm glad to see you here. Lone Star Governance has been training us for several years, and I don't know if you've gone to any board meetings lately or if you've watched on Zoom, but I feel that we are improving toward getting to our goals, so I'm glad we've had this training. Lone Star Governance is a continuous improvement framework created for governing teams, boards in collaboration with their superintendents that choose to commit to intensively focus on one primary objective, and that objective is, of course, improving student outcomes. There are 5 areas or 5 points of Lone Star Governance. They are our vision, accountability, structure, advocacy, and unity. Vision 1. Vision 1 is that the board collaboratively with the superintendent sets the student outcome goals. These goals should have a population, baseline, target, and deadline. Baseline, target, and deadline. Vision 2, the superintendent creates goal progress measures, which are interim goals, to measure whether the goal will be accomplished. These progress measures are predictive as to whether the district will make the goal, and we intend to make the goals. The board identifies and sets non-negotiables for the superintendent and itself. These are things that cannot happen if the goal is to be achieved. Vision 4, the superintendent creates progress measures to ensure that the non-negotiables are being met. Accountability. Accountability 1. The board spends at least half of its time during a board meeting focused on student outcomes. And we have achieved this accountability in the last 3 months, all of the board meetings. Accountability 2, the board measures and communicates but does not interfere in progress towards the vision and student outcome goals, includes evaluation of superintendent and self-evaluation of the board quarterly. Now I'm turning this over to Trustee Kathy Goode.
Good evening, and I'm glad you're here also. It's nice to see some friendly faces out there. The structure of the board is not just decided willy-nilly. There's been a lot of research done, and the board is operating in a much more structured method or way in the last few months, and it has worked better. The board delegates to the superintendent all of the operational authority to accomplish the vision. And so it's not up to us to set the vision and carry it out. It's up to our superintendent. He does a great job. The board receives the material that we're going to vote on at least 14 days in advance of every meeting, so that we have plenty of time to read over the board reports and the different things that are going to be on in the board meeting the next time, so that we can decide if we have questions, if we need any additional information. And only those items that the board does not fully understand or has continued questions on, then is open for discussion. Everything else is put on the consent agenda and just automatically voted on. And as Ms. Daniels stated, about 50% of the board's time, and especially during the board meeting, is used to monitor student outcome goals that we set. And I don't know if any of you were at those meetings, but we had lots of meetings over one summer, like about 10 meetings to set our board outcome goals. And many of you participated and sent in questions about that, and so you had a hand in setting those board outcome goals. The next one is advocacy. In advocacy, the board will have a two-way communication system in place where board members at least once per year listen and discuss the vision and values of the families of this community and our staff. Board members will host community meetings to discuss progress towards student outcome goals at least once per year. And this is that first meeting that we're having doing that. The board will recognize students and staff regarding progress on student outcome goals. And if you've been to a board meeting, the last two, we've had students at our board meeting who have accomplished some of the student outcome goals. And we got to meet those children first, and I think they were kindergarten and first graders. They were precious that scored well on those tests. So stay tuned to our meetings. We're going to be doing that more. And then unity is the other area, and the board worked collaboratively with the superintendent toward accomplishing student outcome goals. Board members' attendance at regular scheduled meetings should be at least 80%. And I think we have 100% at every meeting. I don't remember anybody on the board not ever attending a meeting. And the board will complete quarterly progress tracker evaluation every quarter. And that just members agree that none of the board members are to give operational advice to the superintendent or to any staff members. And now I'll turn board constraints and revisions over to Ms. Fleming.
Just to summarize, some of the things that they were talking about, those are the points that we have to meet in order to improve. And so what improvement means for the board and for the district is that we need to be 80% or higher. And so we'll give you the data that shows you where we are now, where we started, and where we are. But those points that you saw have to be checked off. So we have to be in compliance with those for the Lone Star Governance Overview. So now is really why we need you here as well, and it is our constraints. And there are board constraints and superintendent constraints. And so these are the items that we say, okay, here's what we value in DeSoto. So I know you're listening, it may sound like a constraint means, oh, you cannot do it, but you cannot do it because we value this, which means this should not be removed, this should not be done, this has to be done in order for us to say that we're on the track for our community and what our community wants. So when we created these last year, we had some pretty much set standard of board constraints and superintendent constraints. Now that we moved in through this year, we're kind of looking at it and said, you know what, there's some things that we kind of miss. Like, here's where we want this to show up. And so we went back into the workshop and we come up with new constraints. Well, in order to come up with new constraints, we have to make sure that our community understands what's happening with those, and then we vote on those. And so before we voted on them, we wanted to make sure we had community ownership and buy-in and input, which is why we have the Q&A during the end. But if you have questions during this time, because this is one of the pieces that are on our survey, feel free to stop and I will clarify. So our first constraint. So our original constraint said that the superintendent will not allow educator evaluations that aren't primarily based on student growth data, aligned to the board's student outcome goals, or that lack a student feedback component. So when we saw this, we were saying what we were getting, because what happens is we give the constraint, the superintendent comes up with the constraint progress measurement. So he kind of puts together, puts together, here's how we're trying to address what you're saying you value. And so as we went through the year, we know that everyone was held to an evaluation, but the board said, you know what, we want to make sure that sticks. We want to make sure that our educators are doing exactly what they need to do for our children, because an evaluation will happen. They have to have an evaluation anyways. But what do we want out of that evaluation? And so we revised it and we said the superintendent will not allow fewer than 70% of educators who directly impact workload 4, which is our individual growth for every student in grades 3 through 8, to grow students at or above their student growth targets and ensure no less than 50 coaching and feedback sessions per campus. So in this constraint, we're saying, hey, we want to make sure at the end of the year, 70% of our teachers need to ensure that their students have reached their individual growth goal. And so yes, that is a challenge to the organization, but individual growth shows more than what our state assessment shows. So we need to know that our babies walked in with a penny and they walked out with 5 cents. We need to know those things. And so in order to ensure that, we wanted to put a number to it and say, okay, here's the work that we want to happen on every campus, that we're ensuring that every teacher who teaches grades K through 8, I said 3 through 8, I apologize, I'm thinking really young, but K through 8, pre-K through 8, are attaining their growth goals. So with that, we also looked at, okay, what happens when they go into the classrooms? How are we ensuring that? So we want to ensure that there were at least 50 coaching and feedback sessions that were happening on those campuses. And so that there was a delineated line that says, here's where we're teaching it, here's where we're assessing it, and when we didn't get what we want, here's where we're coaching and constantly providing feedback.
In what time frame do those 50 coaching and feedback sessions need to occur?
So this is basically our constraint for the year. And so over the course of the year, and again, and this is why we're still in revisions and constraints, because we want to hear from that too as well. But right now it's for the entire year that they meet those, especially with the teachers, because if you know our new structures, it's K2, 3, 5, and so on those campuses, now you have intense pushing that's happening for support of the teachers and the students who need those interventions. So there should be coaching that's happening continuously, especially when we're getting the results that we don't want. The next one. Oh, go ahead. Yes.
So how are the students' growth being measured? Like what tools are used to measure the students' growth? And is it done at the end of the year or is it done, because you don't want at the end of the year you find out that there's been no growth. So is it being tracked? Like what tools are the district using to do that?
Good question. So there's 3 parts to that. So the first part, let me break down, is our board monitoring calendar. The calendar says how often each month that the board looks at the board goals that we have. And so board goal 4 is individual growth. So what happens is once we go into board meeting, we give a board, our board progress report. Pretty much as you've been watching our board meetings, you've seen the data, and so we're doing that data conversation. So on that is where the data we're talking about the beginning, the middle, and the end of the year. 3 times of the year, and then they have their intermittent. So, and we're talking about, in the latest part of your answer, was that we use, depending on the grade level, there were different screeners. So ISD, which is what we use, and CLI, which is what we use. And so those have their individual screeners that allow us to provide students those quarterly updates. So beginning, middle, and end.
Thank you.
Yeah. So constraint number 2. The superintendent, and this is the original, the superintendent will not allow educators to be without content-focused PD that is aligned to their student growth expectations. And so everyone knows, if you don't know, PD is the heart of any organization. If your teachers aren't growing, if the staff isn't growing, then we know that our students are not. And so we wanted to make sure that we value PD, like we made sure we put an emphasis on that. And so the revised constraint was the superintendent will not allow educators to be without content-focused PD that is aligned to their student growth expectations, to include at least 21 completed hours, a yearly professional learning calendar provided in the summer, a personalized professional learning plan, and a quarterly evaluation of professional learning outcomes. So now we've just opened up all the expectations of, we're saying for 21 completed hours that every teacher goes into a classroom, they have 21 hours that they completed. On top, just the bottom, that's the minimum. And then the next one we said that we wanted a yearly professional learning calendar. So teachers need to leave knowing what's available for them to take during the summertime, what's going to be available in the school year, and we're not trying to find a space of, here's what we're going to offer. Teachers already know. Because those 21 were already confirmed, so at least they know that they have 21 hours that they have to take. But the extension of that is a personalized professional learning plan. Just like your babies learn differently, our teachers learn differently. And so they have areas of opportunity there. We have novice teachers and we have expert teachers, and we can't keep putting the same people in the same room and expecting them to flourish. And so we want to make sure that we're giving teachers exactly what they need and providing them opportunities to be in front of their own learning. And to be in charge of it. I mean, there's just no better thing, and then you can watch that, which is the last part of it, which says a quarterly evaluation of professional learning outcomes. So now they've received the training, they go in and they work at it, and then there's documentation that shows here's the update. Here's where our teachers found a space that said this is where I was, this is what I know, and this is how I demonstrated in the classroom because my students were successful. Questions on that one? Constraint 3. The superintendent will not allow the district to operate without an online TEKS-aligned curriculum that includes, but not limited to, sample lesson plans, common formatives, and video examples of effective instruction using the curriculum. The revised one says the superintendent will not allow the district to operate without a focus on high priority TEKS in the aligned curriculum that includes, but not limited to, sample lesson plans, common formatives, and video examples of effective instruction using the curriculum. So in this, if you know that without an online TEKS-aligned curriculum, it gets kind of lost in translation, simply because you're saying there's something that the teachers have to access on a computer, and then at the second time you're saying TEKS-aligned. Well, we are mandated to follow the TEKS. That is our curriculum. So we wanted to make sure we would specify that when we're looking at the curriculum, that when teachers are accessing their IPGs, which are their instructional planning guides, and they're able to create their lesson plans, that those high priority TEKS are always at the forefront, and they have to be taught. And what we know is that those high priority ticks then translate over into the state assessment, where we have data that shows if they learn and they perform well on those high priority ticks, you've completed half of the mission of ensuring that our students were going to perform well on the assessment, and that you can show that learning did take place in the classroom, and you can show that students did retain something. And so in those things, and it also allows us to be intentional about the process standards, which I'm not going to get into the technical part of the assessment, but there's process standards, and they have to support those high priority ticks. So it was just another way that we wanted to make sure that administration had a laser focus on teaching in the classroom. Any questions? So Constraint 4 says the superintendent will not make major decisions or recommend items for board approval without first engaging impacted students, family, and staff. The revised constraint says the superintendent will not make major decisions without a drafted plan presented to the board no later than 60 days prior to engaging the impacted students, families, staff, and community with an implementation plan in order to recommend items for board approval. And that sounded like a lot. So let's just take that piece by piece. In the major decisions, again, there were a lot of changes that have happened over the past year. Some where the major decisions had to be made, some where we could have taken some more time to have conversations about. So in the constraint, what we were finding out was that the way the first constraint is written, it pretty much says first engaging impacted students, family, and staff. And so what that means was administration was going to you first to find out, and then coming back and talking to the board. And so some of the conversations became, well, we didn't know about that. And how did we know about that? But the way we wrote it is the way it was interpreted, and so that's what we said. It's okay. We have an opportunity to come back and re-engage, and so we wanted to make sure that it said first, without first engaging the board. So that means that the administration has a plan. They want to build another school. Let's just say they want to build another school. In the attempt to build another school, create another program in the school, that I can be more realistic. There we go. Creating another program in the school would then require them to go out and do planning 60 days prior. So if that means if they're trying to execute it in February of next year, we probably need to have these conversations well before, which means 60 days before it even goes into being engaged with the community. And so we went back and forth with this one because, again, we do have our board and superintendent workshop and the cabinet workshop. And we had a lot of dialogue around this. It was because we want to make sure that they have an understanding of what we're trying to see, and they have an understanding of what it is that we said we want. And when we looked at it, what we found out was that if we figured out of having a conversation 60 days prior, then that will allow us to have a draft of what is being proposed. And then we say, okay, we will provide our feedback, and then they take it to you. So those are the groups, and those are superintendent's group that he already has. He has his student advisory council, the community, the teacher advisory council, parents. So those are the people that he would engage. And if you're looking at how to be involved, just send an email, and we can make sure that you're involved in those councils next year. I'm sure Dr. Weaver would love to have you. But the second part of it is when they went to you, that now we had plenty of time to put it on the agenda to have a conversation behind it, because we wanted the essence of what you really felt, which meant now we're asking for surveys, we're asking for sign-in sheets, we're asking for, well, who was there? Because like you said, it was stated before, if it's only a handful of people here, then guess what? It's a handful of people making decisions that affect many people, so we have to make sure that we're getting more people involved, which means we have more time to go out and find those people before it's brought to us and the decision is made. So hopefully is that clarity? Any questions on that? Yes, sir.
What really defines a major decision in that
So what defines a major? So, and honestly, that was a question. Major decisions, that was a question. How do we define major decisions? And so there are certain things that were statutory, things that we have to always do. And so those, we say those are not major decisions. Like we always have to approve an auditor, we always have to do our state of the district, those things that have to be done. We said major decisions when it came down to things that would disrupt, bring about confusion, or not be clarified in the intent of being transparent. I think so here's a problem. I don't know, because we're still waiting on their progress measures to see what they come up with and how they're going to address that, but I think we did finally get clarity over major decisions. You looking at me as if we still there? Yes, ma'am.
I would say also coupled with that, what parameters would be put into place? So let's say a major decision would be during this pandemic, you decide that you need to close school again. But 60 days is much too long to wait to make that major decision, if that were a major decision.
The state would have to decide that anyway, so that kind of puts out there.
So the district wouldn't make its own?
No,
Well, we can make a decision, we may not be funded for our decision, so we want to make sure that we always
we follow the state's
CDC.
direction. So we wouldn't just make, Dr. Reed wouldn't just say, let's close school because I'm getting nervous about the pandemic. So that type of situation wouldn't take place.
Okay, I thought the districts were granted some authority around if it's a hybrid or if it's a, what type of decision they would make in that regard.
Yeah, so there are schools who do, districts that do hybrids. Remember, so they're taking the option to pay funding themselves. And so now it became a financial thing as to why we don't have that decision to be made. But yes, that was Dr. Weaver's first attempt, and still is on the table because we're back with, still on the table. Then we'll get back to legislative session that we're looking at making those, being able to have that as a possibility. But funding for us has always been first and foremost. And so major decisions, again, it's not finite. We did know that we would have to list some things, again, and just kind of playing around. And so one thing we did come up with, Dr. Weaver said, was that we'll have quarterly meetings. And so in that 60 days is the quarterly of what's going to be expected, in the next quarter. So that so it does answer it, right? Like, but we don't know how that will play out and how they're measuring that. But once we get it, the thought behind it is, if we start it quarterly and think ahead, in the future, cover your 60 days. And of course, if there's anything major like the pandemic starting over, that's no question, we'll do those immediately. But it's just those things where administration is saying, hey, this is where we want to go. We may have a new vision, a new direction. Let's make sure we vetted that with the community. So it's kind of in that grain, but you're right, we still need to define it, absolutely. So there'd be no confusion. Any other questions? And last but not least, I'm going to turn it over. That is my time to turn it over to Trustee Cooper.
All right, we are at constraint number 5, and it reads, the original reads, the superintendent will not allow culture climate to fall below 80% satisfaction per survey data amongst students, family, and staff. And so it was revised, we revised its constraint to read now, the superintendent would not allow culture climate to fall below the nationally normed 80th percentile satisfaction per survey data amongst students, family, and staff, with at least 70% respondents in both the fall and the spring. This allows us to find out more what's going on with climate. We're real big on climate in our classrooms and in our buildings and within our district, making sure that everyone is functioning properly, making sure that families are happy, making sure that our teachers are in a good headspace, and making sure that our principals are leading from a good place. And so this is very important to us. Climate is real big. We believe that climate really affects the outcome for the students. And so once we prepare the climate and set the atmosphere for education, proper education can take place. 2020 to 50% by May 2025. And so a lot of these things, you heard some of this language in the earlier parts of some of the things that we'll be planning on, focusing on. These goals, let's go into detail here to kind of show where we are. College career and military readiness, progress measure and target goal number 1. This is the reports that these are the reports that Dr. Weaver gives us, and we can actually discuss what has taken place, discuss the numbers. The current data toward goals, GPMs, is here. The date is July 28th. Here are the numbers that are listed, printed here. And, these will be available. These will be available online, I believe, as well. Do I need to cover the numbers? Okay. All right. So the student outcome goes in GPMs. As you see in the key, the green is met or on track. The yellow is not met or progress made, and the red is not meant no progress made, and we really don't like to see red. All right, number one, the percentage of high school students who graduate college, career, and or military ready will increase from 36% in May 2019 to 62% by May 2025. The target was 44%, the actual is 43.2%. So we're getting there, but we're not there. Now, I do take into account that we were in the middle of a pandemic, and a lot of our numbers are very skewed and are not accurate. And so that's not an excuse, that is a reality. And our staff had to do some extra work trying to get students ready, get a lot of these outcomes. When we cover a lot of the data, a lot of it is inconclusive because students were not here to take tests. And so that's where we are. However, we still don't rely on that as an excuse. We still use this to show, are we making progress? And we're not met it yet, but we're making progress. 1.1 says the percentage of 10th graders who receive a college rating score on the math section of the PSAT 10 will increase from 14.3% in May 2019 to 27% by May 2025. Now those are low numbers, and when you look at it and say, wow, that's pretty low if you're just looking at percentages. But the target we set was 15. We want to see how it has been going to realistically where we can take it so we can have attainable goals. And so we are actually on track. We're 29%. And so when you see a jump like that, you didn't get too low because of COVID on the other one. You don't really want to get too high here, but you can see we are making progress. And so we took that into account on that one. 1.2, the percentage of high school students who successfully complete an on-ramps college prep course in mathematics by graduation will increase from 0% in May 2019 to 24% by May 2025. The target here was 8%, and we are red 2.6%. So we have work to do there. The 1.3, the percentage of students earning an industry-based certification, IBCs, will increase from 9% for the class of 2019 to 40% for the class of 2024. The target here was 21%, and we fell short and came to 14.6%. So with progress measure and target goal number 1, things are kind of looking like we're doing okay in some areas, and 2 that we've just begun that we're working toward getting better at. All right.
When these adjusted for COVID, were these goals like adjusted maybe lower due to the pandemic? Like, to be fair, like were they adjusted? Would they have been higher if we weren't in a pandemic? Just so that we know what we're looking at. If it was kind of like if there were fair goals set for the district.
I can speak to the other numbers that we normally discuss during board meetings. Nothing was really adjusted for COVID.
Okay.
It was basically who came. We saw data on who took the test, how many students, what percentage of students do we have in total, and so we based it off of that. Her question was, would these goals have changed had we not been in COVID, in a pandemic, in the midst of a pandemic?
Correct.
Okay. Now, as you see here, it's an asterisk here that says all data is drafted and waiting on finalization early this fall. So we're still waiting for more data, but the answer is no. It's almost twofold. We are cognizant of COVID, but we can't rest on COVID. Yeah, because everything was affected by COVID. Evaluations.
Right.
We've never been in a pandemic. Teachers teaching from home. So there are so many factors. However, we did not want to lower our bar, so to speak. We want to stay consistent. So when we come out of COVID, we can have an accurate track to 2020.
Okay, so goal number 2 is the percentage of students at the meets level on the 3rd grade STAR reading exam will increase from 25% in May of 2019 to 65% by May of 2025. Research shows that students are not on grade level. By the time they get to 3rd grade, it gets more difficult to close that gap as they continue through their education, right? The text gets more complex, more reading skills, they get more high order thinking. So our goal is to have all our students on reading level by 3rd grade. So then when you go to the 2.1, those are our progress measures. Those are the things we look at as our students are working towards making sure everybody is on reading level by 3rd grade. So 2.1, the average of the percent of pre-K student, I'm sorry, let me go back and cover the information. The target for the 3rd grade STAR reading was 24%. Our actual was 20.6%. So as you can see, we did not meet that goal. When we look at the progress measures, those are where we're looking at the grade levels as the students are working their way towards 3rd grade. So 2.1, we're looking at our pre-K students that are on track. And these measures are being done by the ISIP, which is the iStation assessor. It said it will increase from 50% in May of 2020 to 65% in May of 2025. Our target was 49.6%, and we did not meet that target with 47.2%. Next, on progress measure 2.2, we're looking at the average of the percentage of kindergarten students that are on track, which is tier 1. Using that ISIP assessment, it will increase from 32.5% in May of 2020 to 45% in May of 2025. Our target was 32.2%. Our actual was 32.6%. So we are actually on track and slightly ahead on that. So that's always good news. The last progress measure that we're looking at for early literacy is 2.3, and it's the average or the percentage of 1st and 2nd grade students that are on track. Using the reading ISIP, it will increase from 38.1% in May of 2020 to 53% in May of 2025. Our target was 37.7%. Our actual is 36.5%, and we did not meet progress on that as well. One thing I do want to point out, when I looked at this, I looked at the target, and then I looked at where we actually started from. So for instance, if you look at goal 2, it says it will increase from 25%, and I noticed that the target was 24%. So I wanted to point out that the target was lower just a little bit because of all the disruption we've had with education, with COVID. You know, we had the first time we lost the last quarter of school in 2020. Last year we had some virtual students, we had some students at home. So we lowered the target just a little bit, and we're going to catch up. The targets will get bigger as we go on, not this school year, but the next 2 years. Because we know there was learning loss, and we have to give our students a chance to get caught up and be realistic. What we have here, goal 3, is numeracy. And so the goal reads, the percentage of students at the meets level on the 3rd grade STAR math exam will increase from 31% in May of 2019 to 53% by May of 2025. Our target was 27%, and our actual is 9%. Now we know that numeracy is something that we need to work on, and that will be something we will be diligently pursuing as we get into the next school year. I think the restructure, the way we'll have the early literacy campuses will help a lot. That way we can focus on the needs of those students. So we have the goal, then we go in and we look at the progress measures that lead us up to the goal. So for progress measure 3.1, the percentage of pre-K students that are on track with the math measure of the ISIP will increase from 55.7% in May of 2020 to 69.6% by May of 2025. Our target was 53.2%. Our actual is 82.3%, so we have surpassed that. Our babies did very well on that.
We look at the next progress measure, 3.2, where we're looking at our kindergarten students that are tier 1 on math. We're saying the target will increase from 58.3% in May of 2020 to 72.9% by May of 2025. Our target was 55.6%. Our actual was 64.7%. So again, we are on track and have surpassed that data for our kindergartners. The last progress measure we're going to look at is 3.3. The percentage of first and second grade students that are on track with math using the ISD will increase from 58.8% in May of 2020 to 73.5% by May of 2025. Our target was 56.1% and our actual was 41.8%. So we are not on track with our numeracy right now for first and second grade. Any questions on this data before we move on?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
So on the literacy, the beginning point was lower, it was 25, and then the target was up to 65. But on this one, the beginning point is higher, but the target is less aggressive. So was that just intentional based on where you all want to focus your resources, or was there a reason why the math wasn't really given the same aggressive targets?
So are you asking why the target is lower than the baseline where we start off at? Am I understanding
They're
correctly?
reading and math, they're two separate subjects.
Two
but
separate subjects, yes.
The target growth in reading was a lot more aggressive. It was 25 to 65. And math started off higher. It was at 31, but then we're only saying we should get to 53. So I'm not sure why we would not be as aggressive with math if we're at a higher target.
I think we look at where we're at, and numeracy is a subject that we need to work on. We have to do some diligent work on numeracy with our students. We wanted the goals to be realistic and attainable. So we looked at the data, and when they set the goals, that's what the numbers that they came up with. I'm sure there was data that was looked at across the district to come up with those goals.
So the question was asked if we lower the goals. So technically, yes, on paper for this, that last year they were reduced because we were in a pandemic. However, because it's a 5-year, the next year they have to increase the next goal. So the next goal will actually be higher than the expected or the target goal for year 21-22. So say this year you saw the 27% at the top. So next year, what they had projected was for 21-22, they needed to be 29. Well, the new target for 21-22 will now be higher and adjusted because of them not meeting the first goal that we started with. So those goals that you see as targets are actually lower than where we started because that was the adjustment because of COVID. Now, where it has to make up the space is 21-22, 23-24 now become dramatically higher. So now they're trying to close the gap and they're going to have to do more work in the upcoming school years because of this adjustment. So we did not lower it, let me start by saying that, but they were asking for the adjustment in the numbers and they had to show new data that reflected where that gap would be closed on this adjustment.
I think I understood
I'm
your
talking about the
question.
end of the goal. I'm talking about the end of the goal, not the target.
Oh, you're talking about the base, the final goal.
Yeah.
So no, okay, right, I'm sorry, so 65%. Ooh, y'all had some good questions now. Well, because it was a conversation, I have to say that because please understand, this was all a conversation. And so some of the changes that you saw that was happening this year is because we fought for that to be 65%.
I know, but the math isn't 65. The ending goal for math is 53 or versus the ending goal for reading is 65. And then if you consider these going up in cohorts, kindergarten's already at 64, so you would think those kids would grow up and you should be able to get a higher goal by the time you get to 25.
Right. So, but you're using your third graders for the current school year. So you don't want to expend this and your third graders not meet their goal as well. So there's a STAR and then there's the universal screeners that they are taking, the progress monitoring there. So 63 and 65, 53 and 65, you're right, because math is showing that we would actually attain that over time. We can always go back once we meet our goal, we can adjust that. But they're not the same targets based off of based off of the conversations that stated if we asked for more, if we challenged the organization more, it was going to cost the organization more.
Okay, so the resources.
Resources.
You're focusing on the literacy piece.
Yes. So literacy, thank you, you'll see that on our letter. Yes, literacy is the board's focus.
Any other questions on early numeracy? The last goal we're going to talk about today, I'm going to talk about today, is individualized growth. And goal number 4 says the percentage of students in elementary and middle schools who reach their individual growth goals in both math and reading on the current universal screening assessment will increase from 22.2% in February 2020 to 50% by May 2025. So our target was 21% and our actual is 24.5%. So we are actually on track with that. Then when we go in and look at the progress measures, we look at each individual one to get us to the goal. The progress measure 4.1, their individual growth goals in reading on the current universal screener was 41.0%. Our actual was 45.1%. So we are actually on track and have surpassed that goal. 4.2, the individual growth goals in math on the current universal screener are 49%. And we actual was 45.2%. So we did not meet that goal. And the last one's 4.3, the goals on the reading ISD assessment will increase from 33%, and I'm missing some data there, but it shows that the target was 32.1, and our actual is 46.5%, so we have surpassed our target for the individual goals. And remember, individual goals is meeting our students where they are and looking for growth in each student, whether they need retention, remediation, or whether they need extension and enrichment. Any other questions about individual goals? Yes, ma'am.
Is this an area where things were adjusted due to COVID because the target is less than
The baseline. Yes, so remember I said that, so that's why I wanted to point that out, because that struck out to me initially. Because of that last quarter we lost in 2020, and this school year it was lowered slightly. Now that doesn't excuse from the end goal, right? So we'll catch up, you'll see them gradually increase, not this school year, but over the next 2 years they'll be larger. Because we have to account for the learning loss that, many of our students had. Any other questions? Okay, so here in DeSoto ISD, we are on a cycle of continuous growth and improvement. Not just for our students, but also for we as board members, trustees. So I am going to turn the mic over to Trustee Clark, and she will talk to you about the progress we're making as board members.
So let's talk about what we've done well though. So we started out this year at 12% for our board updates using our LSG instrument. We grew to 63% in our last quarter. And just recently, as of Monday, we are now at 73%. So we've made huge progress with this board. So kudos to us for working together. All right. Our overall goal is 80%. So we are not there yet, but we are expected to meet that goal in this upcoming quarter as long as we keep working. So watch us work. Progress update 2. We have completed all of our trainings and we are all in compliance. We actually just finished Summer Leadership Institute in June. So we are always working and learning. The board has also approved mental health policy. So now each one of our employees has 2 mental days they can use each year. So we are making sure that our staff is whole at all times. Progress update 3. We received money, $10,000 actually, to make sure we are continually getting the best education that we need to grow for this board. And we were accepted into the 2021-2022 Lone Star Exemplar Cohort by TEA. The board has spent over 50% of its board meeting time focused on student outcomes for the past 2 quarters. We also use a board monitoring calendar, which you will begin to see in our school board room now, starting in August. So you'll be able to actually track our data and what we're spending time on as well. And every 4 months, we will meet with DeSoto as well as Glen Heights city officials to continue to involve our stakeholders so that we can better serve our communities holistically. All right, so what's next for us, right? To maintain this 80% is going to be important for us, and we plan to do that by October 30th, 2021. Action 2. We are going to ensure literacy is at our primary focus this year, and we will be attending training ourselves in August 2021 so that we can also know how we're going to support our teachers as well as Dr. Weaver in making sure our students meet their literacy goal. And lastly, we are committed to these town halls bi-monthly, so look forward to seeing us more, having these open dialogues so we can communicate amongst each other and just be out in the community more. So that's our good news. Y'all got questions? Yes.
I think that this is awesome, right? I can appreciate the clarity of the goals and them being broken down and us having this dialogue. I want to go back to what I think that we've kind of been discussing, the lack of parent engagement, and seeing what as a board, what type of goals do you guys have? Why is there not, that's my question, why is there not a goal for parent engagement increasement as far as like a plan or some type of work? So an example would be like tonight. Is there a goal for trying to get more parents in the room, or what does that look like from a board's perspective?
So actually, we cannot create a parent goal because we are student focused. So TEA does not allow us to focus on money as well. So that's why you don't see a financial goal. TEA is focused on student outcomes because that's why we're here, right? To educate our students. So all of our goals are centered around student outcomes. Now, as a board, we can be prevalent in the community, we can share our information, but again, we can't actually center a goal around parent involvement.
But isn't the part of student outcomes, and the parent is an important part of that, so,
This is the time, honestly. But it's up to us to make sure our constituents are informed, so we can share it out with our groups. I know I share it out with my networks, but again, parents are so busy, so we're having to rely on technology again at this point, right? So even though they can't be here physically, we don't know how many people are tuned in, how many people are gonna go back and watch this. So while people aren't present, we can't count them out and say that they're not informed. They just may be watching from a different outlet. Great question. Anybody else? This is a good board. All right, so make sure you get you some snacks in the bag.
This question's on anything, or is this question's on anything?
The survey. Yeah, you can ask questions right now.
Just since my kid's going to get started this year in kinder, so does the new configuration of the way the elementaries are kind of sliced up, K2 and all that, is that somehow thought to enhance our ability to meet these goals? Because I know that's a new thing that we're doing, and I guess we're hoping it works, but how is those models going to support kind of meeting these student outcomes?
For sure. So my understanding is when we break them up, K2, 3 through 5, and so forth and so on, we can actually focus on early learning. So our kindergartens, our first graders, our second graders are our hard hitters. So if our teachers can spend more time diving into information on the younger level, hopefully by the time they reach that third grade level, we are in a place to where they are where they should be. So starting them early, but student focused, that K-12, that early intervention piece is going to be important, which is why we're breaking them back up, is from my understanding of it. Dr. Weaver, is that correct? Gracias.
And it gives them more support on our campuses.
And it allows for vertical alignment as well. So you have to understand, if they're all in the same building at this point, they can say, all right, this kindergarten student struggled with this, so that first grade teacher can dive back in and assist more. And so you're all right there together, making it all connect all at once, if that makes sense. Ms. Ray?
This is something I struggled with in 2019 when we did a lot of the goals meetings. It's actually knowing the amount of third graders. So if we have like a certain percentage of third graders in 2019, and those third grade, the amount of third graders we have, in 2020, 2021, it'll be nice to kind of know like what that number is. To be looking at percentages and actually student numbers. And I think it will speak more to how aggressive or not aggressive the goal is. Because in 2019 it was 5%, right? And I asked, well, 5% of what number, right? And so when you do the math, you're like, okay, well, only 40 third graders are going to improve over the course of 5 years. So I'm happy to see that the goals have increased, but it will be nice when looking at the data to actually kind of know how many third graders are in the district. How many first graders are in the district. So we know how many students have been impacted or will not be impacted if they don't improve.
For sure.
You know what I mean?
But we also have to understand that number changes, right? So in October is your snapshot period.
Yeah.
By the end of the year, you may not have that same number.
Right.
So because it's continually changing, you're gonna have different data points at different times, but it doesn't negate the fact that we can have a starting point.
Right.
So I think in our last meeting, you'll see more that there's always a number now that says the breakdown of how many are in each component. So we have added that to our actual board meeting, goal progress tracking. So that's part of it now.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, any other questions? Yeah.
Just really quickly, if you could do a shameless plug, organize the different committees that you have. Right, so let's say a survey was sent out, this room would probably be the people who filled out your survey. So it might be a good opportunity to get the people in this room involved on some of the different committees that the board has to help spark that community engagement.
All right, so twofold. We do have committees, but we kind of put them on pause, right? So until we hear from our conservator, if we can truly open those back up, we don't have official committees anymore at this moment. However, we do plan on opening back up the policy committee as well as financial committee. Those are the two we had, and we do plan on opening back up, but we are waiting on our conservator to approve if we can go back to having those meetings yet. Another shameless plug while we're here.
Referring to his committee. You guys have committees, but
She said school board committee.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I think it would be a great time to open up for Dr. Weaver's committees, whether it be parent, whether it be community. I know you have several, Dr. Weaver, but these opportunities are the great time to get people that are in the room to be on those committees also.
Make sure you signed in if you haven't signed in. I'll call him up in a second for him to address his committees. Let's see. Oh, shameless plug. Make sure your students are reading every night. We have a I don't even know the name of the group anymore. Read across DeSoto Good Heights. There you go. Join our Facebook group and make sure you are reading with your scholars every night. If you have your phones, please pull them out. Scan this lovely QR code.
Again, the constraints, we need you to do the survey so that you can give feedback with those constraints. If you have any questions later, or if you think of anything and you say, hey, this may be something else, feel free to email us. Feel free to call if you have that information to the district, and then you get that to us. Again, we're looking at bringing these to votes in September. So again, just to give the ample amount of time that we have these, the town halls, giving the two-way feedback, I think it's pretty beneficial so that we can engage in dialogue ourselves. So with that, are there any other questions?
Hey y'all, can y'all give our board of trustees a big hand for having this meeting? They've done a phenomenal job and have spoken exceptionally well about the work of the system. Truly honored to be here to see you all. We have several committees, and advisory committee, students, and staff. And there'll be a number of other opportunities throughout this year to get engaged, give your feedback, and to help us shape where we're going. If you want to be a part of those committees, just email superintendent@DeSotoISD.org. We'll get you plugged in immediately. Again, thank you for your time. I'll turn it back over to our president.
With that, have a wonderful night. We look forward. Our next big event is our Four Corners August 5th at Captain Johnson.